session so I could take as long as I want, right? I think that's the reason we're a little bit lighter now. People must have expected that. All right. All right, so this session, hot topics. So we're talking about premarital sex, pornography, social media, extracurricular activities. Apparently, I'm not living right. Okay. All right, so we've got our slides coming. I'm cursed today in the way of slides, but we're all right. It was about probably 10, 15 years ago. We had gotten together for a family meal. Seems like it was Christmas. I don't remember exactly, but we'd gotten together with my father's side of the family. You know, you see the people that you don't always see as uncles and cousins. And my dad, he called everyone together. We met in the living room of my aunt's house. And what happened is something that I will never forget. He proceeded to tell them about my Uncle Eddie. My uncle had left his wife. He decided he didn't love her anymore, told her that, moved out. Within a very short time, he had become involved with another woman, remarried, moved out of state. And a lot of my other aunts and uncles and cousins were not aware of this. He attended the congregation where we attend, and so my dad knew a little bit more about the situation. And so he proceeded to tell them about what had happened and how, you know, we may not see him anymore. He's just, unfortunately, he's left his family, he's abandoned them, and he's abandoned the church. To which one of my cousins said, "Oh, I thought you were going to say he had cancer." And my dad said, "Well, I wish I could tell you that. That would be better news." But really, she just said what everybody else probably was thinking. You know, I shouldn't be so hard on her. Just this past Wednesday, my dad stood before the congregation. He's an elder where we attend. They are teaching a series of classes this quarter on church discipline and withdrawal of fellowship. I've got two brothers. One, 3 years younger than me, died in a car wreck at 19. One, 10 years older than me, about 5 years ago, he basically followed in the steps of my uncle. Told his wife, "I don't love you anymore," wasn't really willing to work on anything, left his family. Guess what? Got involved with another woman, remarried unscripturally. My dad stood before the congregation and said, "I have two sons who, one died unexpectedly at a young age several years ago. I have one that's unfaithful and who's spiritually dead, needs to be withdrawn from. The second's harder." Those were his words. We're at war. I don't know if we really believe that or not. We don't always act like it, but we're at war. There's a war between the spiritual in this life and the things of God and the physical. And too many times we get way too wrapped up in the physical. Ephesians 6 and verse 12 says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places." You see, the things that we are fighting, we can't physically see always. You know, it's not like we're going out and we're in a physical war and we know who our enemies are necessarily. We can't see them with our eyes oftentimes, but we do know that we are under attack. 1 Peter 5 and verse 8, and a verse that we're very familiar with, says that we should be sober-minded and be watchful, for our adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Do you believe that? Do you believe that Satan is after you? Do you believe that Satan wants your children? Do you really believe that? You see, again, so many times we read that and we believe it in our minds. We comprehend what it says, but then our decisions don't reflect that. We're very, very proactive in this society today. I would be very surprised if this congregation does not have a security team. Am I right? Okay, so on Sunday mornings, on Wednesday nights, Sunday nights, you've got a security team, people that are watching out for somebody to come in that could cause a problem, an active shooter type situation. What's the chances of that happening? I mean, probably less than 1%. In this congregation, I realize it happens places. And I'm not trying to, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't do those things, but I'm saying we prepare for that. Okay, we prepare for that. That's highly unlikely. Do we prepare for this? Do we prepare for the fact that we know 100% that Satan is after our children? 2 Corinthians 2, verse 11, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his designs or his devices. See, we need to know how Satan operates. We need to know how Satan is after us, and we need to be alert to how he is attacking our families. And these are all things today that we're talking about that are physical things, physical ways that Satan is attacking our families. And I 100% guarantee you he is after your kids or your grandkids, or you using these tactics. These are some statistics that I pulled. This is from the Barna Group. Among teens and young adults 13 to 24, only a third say viewing porn is wrong. 32% say it's wrong. Okay, so we're talking about anybody at age 13 and 24 is viewing porn wrong. A third say yes. First time exposure to porn is between the ages of 8 and 11. I have an 8-year-old. That's terrifying. Okay, that scares me to death. This is the most likely people to view porn in a frequent way. Okay, so you have, and you may not be able to make those out, but the first bump there at 72% are males who are not practicing Christians age 13 to 24. Males that are not practicing Christians age 25 plus are the first two, but if you look at number 3, 41% of males who are practicing Christians age 13 to 24 make up 41% of them view pornography frequently. Go down 2 more, and you have males that are practicing Christians 25 plus. That's us, okay, guys? So there are about 23% of our age group who view pornography frequently. And we can pretend that this is not a problem in the church, but I know for a fact that it is. There may be men in this room who are struggling with this and struggling with being addicted to viewing pornography. That's a very real problem. If you talk to any preacher in the Brotherhood, you will find that out for a fact. This one was really interesting. Look at this is what people view as morally wrong. Okay, so 56% of people view that not recycling is morally wrong. 32% think that viewing pornography is morally wrong. So it's more morally wrong to not recycle or if you look on down there at 38% significant consumption of electricity or water, that's more morally wrong than viewing pornography. This is the world that we live in. And we can put blinders on and we can act like it's not a problem in the church, but again, it is. Brother Glenn Colley tells about teaching a class of young men, preteens and early teens, and teaching them, and he asks them about their first exposure to pornography. These are children that are members of the church, a lot of them homeschooled, and they're in his class on a Wednesday night. He asks them about their first exposure to pornography. Every young man had a story. Okay, so this chart shows those how often or how frequently people come across versus seek out pornography. And this top one we're looking at are teens aged 12 to 17. 8% of them come across it daily. 21% come across it weekly. Another 21% come across it twice a month. 30% less often, and 21% never. But look at those who are seeking it out as well. We don't need to be ignorant of Satan's devices. This is a real problem, and so we can't ignore it. I don't have time this evening to talk about each of these topics that I've been assigned in a ton of detail. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about things in a general way to help wake us up and to help us to combat the problems that we're facing as a whole. That includes pornography, it includes extracurricular activities, all the things that we are facing in our society. We've got a plan. Okay, so I really appreciate Austin and his things that he said this morning and talking about intentional parenting, being intentional about what we do. We have to have a plan as parents. We can't just wander through this thing and hope that we come out on the other end okay. Okay, we need to be thinking about what our focus is. This picture is one that's always been one of my favorites. It's when my oldest daughter was in the NICU. She was 2 pounds and 4 ounces when she was born. This is Denise's first time to hold her. The way that you view that picture is the way that moment stands out in my mind. Nothing else was going on. It was us and our daughter. But in that room, there were alarms going. If you've ever been in a NICU, you know there were alarms going off. There were nurses helping other babies. There were all kinds. There were babies crying. It was busy. But for me, that's all that was happening. That was my focus, and I think this picture captures that. But apply that to our lives and how we are parenting. What is our focus? What is our plan? Do we have a mission statement that defines what our focus is as parents? Think about the things that we talked about this morning, and we think about the things that I brought up about family Bible time. What is our goal for our children? What is it? What's true success? True success, if you ask my children, is living your life and going to heaven. That's it. Nothing else matters. That's our focus. If I can't accomplish that, if I can't put them on a path toward heaven, then I've failed as a father. That is my focus. That is my job as a father. That is my aim, and that's what I'm about. Everything else, take it or leave it. But I've got to prove that by the way that I live my life and by the way that I organize my life and by the way that I plan. So what is your focus? Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 13 is a passage we all know very well. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. This is man's all, I believe one translation says. That's our job. That's our life. That's what it's all about. Coming from a man who tried it all. Our duty, our goal, our job in this life is to fear God and keep his commandments, and we've got to put that in our children. So here are some questions that I would like you to ask yourself, but I want you to ask yourself these questions in light of your focus, in light of your goal, in light of your mission statement. When should my child get their first cell phone? Okay, if we're living this life and we're just saying, well, it's like, well, when do When do their friends get a cell phone? 8? I don't know. I mean, it's just, at what age do they get a cell phone? I've got a niece that's 6 that has a cell phone. What? What? Like a smartphone at 6 years old. So how do I make that decision? Well, if I've got my focus, and my focus is I'm getting my child to heaven, and I know that device is online and it is a mechanism in which they can access pornography. I heard one TED Talk recently I listened to, and the guy said he was asked this question frequently: when should my child get their first cell phone? And his response is another question: when do you want them to start viewing pornography? Ouch. I heard another, I believe his brother Steve Miner, he referred to as a hand grenade. You're giving your child a live hand grenade. The things that they can access on that cell phone, you can't control it as adults. I have trouble controlling it as an adult, right? I mean, is that true? Do we have trouble controlling our cell phones? And the fact that, I feel like I've got to have this, I just got a text message. What was that? I feel like I've always got to have it, and it vibrates, and I pick it up, and it controls me, right? You can't control it, and yet you're going to take that device and you're going to hand it to a child. I'm just asking us to think about the decisions that we make in light of our focus. What activities should we be involved in? What extracurricular activities should they do? Should they be involved in? What things should you do as a family? I'll get into that a little bit later. Should mom work outside the house? Sorry, I told Austin that if his superpower was humor, mine was shock and awe. So I'm just going there, okay? How do we make that decision if mom's going to work outside the home? What movies or TV shows do we watch? Personally, first of all, somehow, for some reason, in our society, it's acceptable once you get to a certain age and you're an adult, you can watch rated R movies or whatever you want to watch, and somehow that's okay as Christians. I don't know why we feel that way, but I don't have time to get into that either, so I better not start. What job should I take? Should our kids be on social media? One parent said that her child's first exposure to pornography was at the age of 14. Y'all know what polishing the pulpit is? She was on Instagram and searched #PTP and was exposed to pornography at the age of 14 on Instagram. Okay? How much screen time do our children get? How much exposure to these sorts of things? How much access? And these are things that we have to constantly be asking ourselves and reminding ourselves. I've believed all of this about access to media devices for a long time, but it was about a month ago we realized, and it just hit me, that we've been sending our children to their rooms during nap time with Kindle Fires to listen to audiobooks. Those things are online. They're 8 and down, so I didn't really think about it, but we put a stop to it that day. It's too dangerous. It's too dangerous to allow that to go on and to pretend like everything's going to be okay and my child won't be affected. I want you to plan to be different. In 1 Peter 4:4, it says they think it's strange that you don't run with them to the same excess of riot. Do people think that we're strange? Do people look at the way that you live your life, the things that you allow your children to do, the things that you do as parents, and they think that you're strange? Or do you watch the same TV programs that they do? Your kids play the same sports that they do. They go to the same dances that they do. Your children are on social media just like their children. They have cell phones just like their children. Are we the same or are we different? I say that to say this. It's going to be hard, and that's going to have to be a conscious decision, because if you're not prepared to be different, you're going to get sucked into making the same decisions that everyone else in this world is making. You may have to sacrifice, okay? You may have to sacrifice. That may mean that you don't have a television in your home. what would we do? If that's a decision, I mean, did I imagine somewhere that Jesus said, if your right hand offends you, cut it off? And if your right eye offends you, pluck it out? Did I imagine that being somewhere, or is that there? But yet we're not willing to sacrifice even our televisions with all the filth that comes with them, all the filth that it brings into our living rooms. I want you to imagine a plumber that you've hired to come into your house. And he's coming to fix a faucet, and he's working underneath your sink, and he's there, and your little boy is watching him, and he raises up and hits his head and just lets it fly. How long does it take you to throw that man out of your house? Or tell him to clean up his language in front of your children? And yet we pay money to broadcast that same language in our living rooms, and we sit in front of it and call it entertainment. You know, we don't believe that we are at war. I'm convinced of that. People are going to think you're different. People are going to think you're all sorts of things, and you may lose friends. I'm really glad I don't know many of you all, because you may not be my friends after this. I know this is hard. I know I'm stepping all over toes, and I intend to step all over mine. Because we've got to wake up as parents, as Christian parents. If we expect our children to be faithful, and we're not planning, and we're not answering the tough questions, and we're not thinking about these things, I'm not saying your children won't be faithful. But if they are, and if they do become faithful, it will not be because of anything that you did. It will be in spite of you. Is that too hard? We've got to wake up, parents. We've got to stop pretending that we are not at war. We've got to stop pretending that everything's okay and that we can just go along in this life and act like everyone else, and our children are going to be fine. Austin mentioned about he doesn't know of very many people whose children are more faithful than they are. It's not acceptable to me to raise children who are a little less faithful than I am. I want to raise spiritual champions. I want to raise elders and deacons and preachers in the Lord's church. I want to raise people who care less about this life than I do. I want to take my children and I want to push them forward past where I could never go. That's my goal. Because I don't want them to fall into the snares that are set before them that the devil has laid. We have to plan, but we also have to guard. Don't you love how this works? I never even met Austin before, but this lesson, whoever set this up, I mean, it plays so well. Talking about guarding and setting boundaries, like Austin talked about this morning. Thorns and snares are in the way of the crooked. Whoever guards his soul will keep far from them. Proverbs 22 and verse 5. There are going to be things that are there that will ensnare your children, that will ensnare you, and we have to be ready and prepared to guard ourselves against those things. So what are we going to do? What are the threats? We have to identify what the threats are. We've talked about pornography, and we'll talk about it more in just a moment, but what are the threats that our children face? Again, we're more concerned with the physical threats. We're more concerned that they'll go out in the woods and get bit by a snake, or that someone will come into this church building and open fire. But the last time I checked, we're not to fear those who can kill the body, right? But the one who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Our priorities are wrong. Our priorities are messed up, and we think too much about this physical life and not enough about the spiritual, and that's hard to try to turn that around. Again, pornography. We have mobile devices. We have internet access, social media. Again, a lot of people, the same lady that I told you about who her daughter was exposed to pornography at 14 on Instagram, she follows, I don't know if you know how, I don't even know how Instagram works really, but if you follow people, and that's you see what they follow, basically. Her daughters were allowed to be on Instagram. They followed. I mean, if you could just hold up in your mind the parents that you think are like the most admirable Christian parents in the brotherhood, her kids followed their kids. They had to get off Instagram because they were being exposed to pornography through those children. Okay, so these are not just Sunday morning only Christians that are viewing this. These are preachers' kids. These are elders' kids, deacons' kids, whatever. These are the people that you look at throughout the brotherhood and you look up to and you admire, and their children are the ones that are viewing pornography, and a lot of them are in denial about it. We've got to open our eyes. We have to take these devices that we've given them and throw them away if that's what it takes. The last thing we do is we take an online device and we put it in our child's bedroom. If you have a computer with internet access and it goes into your child's bedroom, or a tablet or anything with internet access, and they have access to that in their bedroom, that has to stop now. Your children are not the exception. I hate to tell you. The devil's working too hard for that to be the case. Television and media. The TV shows that we watch, the TV shows that we allow our children to watch, there's the movies, the music, there's no excuse anymore. My parents at least could say, well, I can't even understand the lyrics. You can look them up. Right? Do you have access to a computer where you can look up the lyrics of songs that your children are listening to? Can you look up what's in a movie and how many curse words are in that movie before you take your children and let them sit in front of it? Listen, they're exposed to things and video games and YouTube. Video games, you can't think about just the video game on the phone. If it has a chat function, other people can chat into your child and take advantage of your child and molest your child in a sexual way through that chat function, and expose them to things that you would never expect them to be exposed to on harmless games. If there's a chat function, it needs to be disabled. If it can't be disabled, your children don't need to be playing it. Hopefully there are no teens in here. They'll all be mad at me. So YouTube, video games, all the media that we have access to, that we have given our children access to, and we somehow, again, if you're watching it, then that's a whole other problem. There are things available now like VidAngel where you can filter out those things, and there were some things that I pulled up on VidAngel, and I marked out everything that we didn't want to see, and it's got a little white bar, and every time it marks something out, it puts a black line. There wasn't anything left by the time I filtered it. There was no point to watch it. Some of the stuff that's on TV and on these movies is not fit to watch. It may mean you don't have that opportunity to talk to your friends about the latest TV show that's lifting up homosexual marriage or homosexual relationships or things of that nature that we have no business watching. Again, it's hard, and if it means throwing out your TV, and what I would really challenge you to do, I challenge anybody here that has a TV to do this, and turn off the TV for a month. It's right in the middle of March Madness, didn't you say? Sorry. Maybe wait till after March. Turn off the TV for a month. No TV. And turn it back on and see if just the commercials don't make you sick at the immodesty and the things that are put forward out there that you don't even realize are coming into your home. Because after we got rid of ours and I was at a friend's house and the TV was just running in the background, I was appalled. It was what was being put in front of my children's faces just in commercials. Okay. Immodesty. Putting this on you guys. Dads, this is on you. You know what immodesty is because you've had to deal with it. Right? We know as men what causes us trouble. Do I need to define it? Cleavage, skirts that come up to, halfway up their thigh, they're really short, bathing suits. We know that those things cause us problems as men, and then we send our daughters out in that for men to look at them. We know how men look at women. We know how men of the world look at women. We know how we struggle with that, and yet we want to send our daughters out in that type of dress. We were at an event not too long ago. The event was hosted by 2 members of the church. My 6 and my 8-year-old both made a comment about the immodesty that was there. And the longer we stayed there, the sicker I felt. We got in the car and I apologized for taking them to that event. It's a shame that I had to apologize for that. I've seen too many Christian dads allow their children to go out and wear things that they have no business wearing, whether it's at the beach, the swimming pool. Listen, this may mean that you don't go to the water park. You think you could live your life without going to the water park or the beach, possibly? Do you think you can live your life by making the decision that your daughter isn't going to play volleyball because they wear shorts? I don't know what you call them, but shorts that come up to here that are skin tight and a shirt that exposes their cleavage. Am I going to put my daughter in that situation? Am I going to let her cheerlead in something where her underwear are showing and she's dancing provocatively in front of men? Sometimes I think we have lost our minds. Guys, dads, you're the gatekeepers. You're the ones that have to guard your daughter's heart. You can't put them in that sort of thing and let them go out and spend time with boys and then at the same time expect them to remain pure. It will not happen. So this applies to television, it applies to sports, it doesn't, the rules don't change because we're going to the beach. And you can dress your children modestly, but you're going to throw them in there in a body of water with everybody else that's not dressed modestly. So you've got to think about that. You cannot ignore it. Wasting time. Okay, we're all guilty of this, or at least I know I am. I mean, social media, and how much time do we spend just scrolling and doing things of that nature, and then we say we don't have time to do Bible time with our kids. Extracurricular activities. There's nothing wrong with your kids playing sports as long as they're dressed modestly. But when we as parents become Uber drivers for our children, driving them around from event to event to event, and we have no time at home, we have no time to instruct them, we have no time to spend teaching them about God's Word because we're so busy doing things of this world, we've missed the point. We don't have very much time with our children. We have to guard that time. We have to make sure that we're not wasting that time. Nobody said you had to be entertained, so nobody said you had to sit down and watch an hour or 2 hours of TV at night, or your children. Video games. You think about all the things that waste our time. You have a limited amount of it. You have a lot to do as a parent, so don't waste your time. Covetousness. Should mom work outside the home? I don't have time to go into it in detail. Titus 2, if you want to read there and look at the definition of the word homemaker. It means keeper of home, a domestic, a stayer at home, if you look up the definition of the word. I would apologize for that, but that's what the Bible says. So I understand. I'll give my disclaimer. I understand there are situations where mom has to work. I regret that. But as another person said recently, I heard of this quote. As he dropped his baby off at daycare, and he said, "We're going to miss him, but everybody knows that both parents have to work nowadays if you want to have nice things." Okay, he said it, but the way that we act sometimes, we all believe it. This world is not about having nice things. You've never been promised that as a Christian. If you want to have nice things and you want to chase after the world and you want to have $30,000 cars in the garage and live in the nicest neighborhoods and you want to do that at the expense of your child's soul, then go ahead, but don't pretend that you're not putting your child at more risk by doing that. The decisions that we make, you cannot justify mom leaving the home and going to work so that you can buy a new car, so that you can live in a nice house, so that you can go to Disney World. That's worldliness. You're chasing after things of this world and you're putting them in priority over the things that are spiritual in nature. How much should dad work? Should dad go and work 80 hours a week so that, again, we can live in a nice neighborhood, so that we can, whatever. I believe it was Paul who said, having food and raiment, so food and clothing, therewith let us be, I'll finish it. Y'all know it? Content. That's all we're promised. You may be blessed to have more, and I hesitate almost to call it a blessing, because the Bible teaches very clearly and has very strong warnings that the more material things we have, the more we're going to be tempted and the harder time we're going to have as Christians. So if you don't have much, really, you're blessed. If you have more, you're going to have a harder time, because you're going to be tempted to want the things that the world has put out there, that are advertised on the television, that everybody else, all your peers have. You're going to want the $30,000, $40,000 car. You're going to want the nice house in the nice neighborhood, and you want your kids to go to the nice private school or the public school and in a nice neighborhood, or you want to go to a good college. And so you will sacrifice potentially your child's soul because of physical things. Premarital sex. Okay, so when should children date? Well, that's a good question. That's something that I don't know that I'm ready to answer for everyone here. But what's the purpose of dating? It's to find a spouse to marry. If your child's not going to be married in the next 2 years, I don't know that they really have any business dating. That's unpopular. But you're going to take a young boy and a young girl who are balls of hormones. You're going to put them together and let their emotions build up. And then you're going to expect them to date for how many years and remain abstinent? You're promoting this relationship. And how do you define dating? I'm sorry, but if you define dating as you taking my daughter away from my house in your car and you going somewhere alone, I'm not interested in that. We all know where that leads. Are your children alone? Do they come home to an empty house? I knew of people when I was in high school, so we're going back several years. When I was in high school, a friend of mine was accustomed to coming home to an empty house. So he had his girlfriend come over one day, and they had sex in his parents' house because they were home alone. Bad influences. So we've got influences of friends, the people that they are friends with. And again, you can't even trust, really, that faithful members of the church are necessarily the best influences all the time. I mean, because if you don't know those children, you don't know their values, you can't even guarantee that. But you've got to put some safeguards in place and make sure that you are there and present with your children and guard against those bad influences. Social media influences, the things that they get exposed to and the ideas that they get exposed to on social media and media in general. I mean, you can't... I'm convinced that a lot of cartoon Disney movies really start to put this seed in people's minds and children's minds that, just because you live a different way than everybody else around you that's, of your same species. I think it's Shark Tales is what I'm thinking of. I mean, you got the shark that doesn't eat other fish or whatever, right? Lenny. At the end, he just doesn't like the other. He's a little different. And we need to be accepting. So the idea at the end is we need to be accepting of this other shark because he's a little different. When you look at the things that Disney promotes when they're movies, and you tell me that they aren't really trying to plant a seed in your child's mind so that they'll be accepting of people who endorse and practice in alternate lifestyles. We have to be careful. I mean, I know that's extreme, calling out Disney movies, but I don't care if my children see Shark Tales. I mean, it's not that important to me, and so if I think it's a problem, then we won't watch it. So we've got to train our children. Okay, so you do that in Bible time, you do that, and anything that you're doing any day, every day, when you're, again, Deuteronomy 6, so we can go back to that, when you rise up, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, you're always teaching and training your children. But there are some certain things that we need to put in place to guard our children, to train them so that, because at some point in time, we can create these boundaries and we can create this people that oppose what I'm saying right now, they'll say, well, you just can't shelter them. You can't shelter your kids. They're going to live in the real world. Yes, I agree. You can't just outright shelter them and expect them to just throw them out into the world. But my home is a training ground. Think of it as basic training. Okay, you don't take someone who hasn't gone through basic training and put them on the front lines of combat. You just don't. They go through training first. And so my home is a training ground for my children. And so I'm going to teach them. I'm going to train up this child in the way that he should go so that when he's old, he will not depart from it. That's my job. I'm going to train them. So what do they need to know? That's the question. What is it that your children need to know? What are some things that they need in their lives to realize and to know before they leave your house for sure? They need to know that there need to be boundaries in relationships. Here's my shock and awe. Oral sex is sex. That's something that your children need to know. My wife said, why do they need to know that? And I said, well, they're going to get exposed to that. And they can get an STD by participating in that. And that the world is going to teach them about oral sex if you don't. So they need to know that. But if you put these other boundaries in place, they should never get to the point where they're tempted. So they don't need to be alone with someone of the opposite sex. Mike Pence understands that. Right? You remember all that controversy, and they were making fun of him just before the Me Too movement, ironically enough, about how he would not meet with a woman alone that wasn't his wife. He wasn't the first to do that, and we should put things like that into practice as well. They need to know that. Your children need to know that, and they need to have that established as their own personal boundary when they leave the house. This is embarrassing. I'm going to tell it on myself. I was in pharmacy school. We had rotations where we would go out to different hospitals and pharmacies, and we would work, and it was part of our last year of school. And I was on a rotation with two other people, one of them a female, one of them a male, and we had a lunch break. I didn't think anything about it, really. Denise and I were married. We went, took her car, my car, went and ate lunch. Didn't really think anything about it. Nothing happened. We just had lunch because it was lunchtime. We were leaving PTP. I get a phone call. It's this girl's husband. And she said, there's a rumor going around that you're having an affair with my wife. I about fell out of the car. And I said, listen, I realize now, and it hit me at that moment, what my dad had tried to teach me that I didn't hold on to, apparently, that you don't ever put yourself in a situation like that. That was my fault for putting myself in a situation that could even ever be thought of me. That was a wake-up call. And so our children need to know that when they leave our home. They need to know that that God has put certain boundaries in our lives that are to protect us and to protect the sanctity of marriage. They need to know, our daughters need to know that they don't need to be giving full frontal hugs to males. It's just not appropriate. They need to know that dancing is inappropriate. I mean, we expect our daughters to be pure, and we're afraid that they're going to miss out of going to the prom or homecoming, and so we put them in this immodest dress, and we send them into a dimly lit room, and we let them move their bodies close to their boyfriends, and we say, now y'all, remain pure, don't have sex. If you don't want to fall down, don't walk in slippery places. That's a slippery place, and we put our children in those positions for what purpose? So that they don't miss out on something physical that does not matter. Where hands should be, they should know that hands don't need to be anywhere that maybe a basketball uniform would cover up. You could use that. If clothing should cover it, then they probably don't need to be touching it. They need to know that. And they need to have these boundaries for themselves so that when they leave your house and they don't have your boundaries, they have boundaries that they're living by because you've taught them principles that are laid out in God's Word about purity, and they know how to protect themselves from that. Safe use of technology. So again, they need accountability. If your children have smartphones, you got to have something on there to at least, they could probably get around it if they want to, but you need some way of knowing what they're looking at. So you set up accountability or filters on their phones or something that blocks the bad content or at least lets you know what they're looking at so that there is some accountability. They need to know that even after they leave your house that it would be smart. Really, husbands, it would be smart if we had that accountability to our wives, that they can see what we're viewing on our phone that holds us accountable and protects us. What we're doing is we're protecting our children and protecting ourselves and training them to protect themselves from the things that the ways that Satan is attacking us. I would suggest on cell phones a flip phone. And you're probably going to have to pay more for the flip phone than you would an iPhone. What sense does that make? But that's how they get you, right? Because you've got an old iPhone laying around, and I can either throw this away, or I want to pay $50 for this old flip phone, and I'll just give them my old iPhone. That's how it happens. Get a flip phone, and it's got a camera, and sexting is a thing if you didn't know that. And so you take sandpaper and you scrub the camera. Again, if there are teenagers in here, I'm not your friend at the moment. But otherwise you're handing them something that could likely destroy their soul. It's just the reality. They need to have a biblical defense for the things that they believe and the things that they're doing. It's all fine and good if it's your faith and you're putting these things into place, but if you're not spending the time to teach them, if they don't realize that these are really boundaries, God has set in place boundaries to protect us, to protect the sanctity of marriage, to protect us from all sorts of things, and to protect our souls ultimately. God has put boundaries in place, and so they're not really ultimately our boundaries. There are things that we put in place to help protect us so that we can live holy lives before God. They need to understand the why. They need to understand why it's not appropriate to wear certain things. Dads, your girls probably won't understand why they can't wear something. Everybody else is wearing it. It's not a big deal. Everybody wears a bikini to the beach. Well, not you. And here's why. They need their own faith by the time they leave your home. They need to know what they believe and why they believe it. It needs to be their own faith. So many of our children, they leave our homes, they go to college, and they go into the world, and they fall away, and we ask, why did they fall away when they went to college? And we want to blame it on the college professors. We want to blame it on somebody else. But the truth is, and studies have shown, that we never had them to begin with. They may have been dipped in the water, but their faith was never their own. Prayer. Sometimes I think we underestimate the power of prayer. We need to be praying for strength for both us and our children. We need to be praying for humility, to realize when we've done wrong and we've messed up and we need to do better. And we need to pray for forgiveness. Our children need to hear that. They need to see that in us, and we need to model that for them. They need to see when you mess up. We don't want to show them that, but they need to see that. I had a cousin, it's been about 3 weeks ago. She was about 5 years younger than me. In high school, she'd gotten messed up with drugs and in and out of rehab. I didn't really realize this because her parents were faithful members where we attended. Actually, her brother was one of my best friends in high school, and we'd lost touch, really, and I didn't really realize what was going on. They stopped attending. They sat in the ER the other night on Wednesday nights. My dad was on one side of her dad, and I was on the other. They said that she'd passed away from injuries from a gunshot wound. 30 years old. I was ashamed to hear what he had to say, his father. He said, guys, I know we've not been there. I know we're not faithful like we ought to be. We haven't been in church. But to be honest with you, I just didn't want to answer the questions. I was ashamed of what my daughter was. I knew she was doing wrong, and we tried to get her all the help that we could, but I was just ashamed to face you all and come to church. I felt about this big. If we as a church are a body of people who want to act like we have it all together so much so that someone who's really struggling and hurting in this life feels ashamed to come in among us, we're messing up somewhere. We're too proud. We're too afraid to see other people, let other people see that we mess up. We want to put this good face out there on social media, and like that video that he showed earlier, we want to look like we have it all together. That's the most important thing for us, is we want others to think that we have it together. But this parenting thing is hard. Our kids are going to mess up. Our kids are going to fall down. They're going to make mistakes because they're kids. As parents, never get to the point that you are too ashamed to ask for help. To ask for someone to pray for you and to pray with you. We can't allow that attitude of pride and arrogance to build up so much inside of us, and we can't allow the church, as other members of the church, we can't allow it to become a place to where other people view us as perfect people, and they just can't live the kind of lives that we're living. You can do this thing. I mean, I've talked about a lot of things that are hard. Hebrews chapter 11 is a passage that we're all familiar with. Read about those who live by faith. It's interesting there at the end, starting in verse, really starts before that, but if you look at verse 33, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead, raised to life again, and others were tortured. This is where we need to pay attention. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings. Yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn asunder. They were tempted, they were slain with the sword, they wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. There's a chapter break coming up, but I want you to skip the chapter break and pretend it does not exist. Chapter 12, verse 1, wherefore seeing we are compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses. Look at these people who went before you. Look at the things that they endured. Look at the things that they suffered. Look at what they were willing to do for their faith. Look at them. We are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. Lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. Look at Jesus and look at what he did for you. He hung on a cross, was scourged, hung on that cross naked, humiliated before the crowd, and died a death of a criminal on a cross for you. For consider him, Jesus, that endured such hostility against himself. Look at him. Look at Jesus. Look at what he did. Look at what he endured, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding your blood. We live in a very comfortable time, a very easy time. We don't have to worry about somebody sawing us in two because we are unwilling to denounce Jesus. People before us did that. People were tortured. Our Lord, to save your soul, died an agonizing death on the cross. This is hard, but you've not shed your blood yet. You've not been asked to go that far yet. We can do it. We can live lives that are acceptable to God. We can raise children who are spiritual champions. But it's going to take us protecting our children. It's going to take us planning, guarding, and training our children. We just got to take the time to do it and put aside all these worldly things that are distracting us from that goal. Let's go to God in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we are so thankful for you. We're so thankful for your Son. We know what he went through for us, and we know what he went through to purchase the church, shedding his blood, and how he is there as our advocate. We know that we are not perfect. We know that we mess up. And that scares us, Father, because we know that we're trying to raise children who are under attack. We know that there are many challenges, and we're oftentimes afraid of where our children could end up if they don't develop faith in you and see your Son as the sacrifice that they need for their own souls. Help us to put aside the things of this world. Help us not to be so caught up in everything that's going on around us with our jobs, with the material possessions that we want to acquire, the things that are tugging at us on every side. Just help us to focus on what's most important. Help us to focus on the challenges and to be able to overcome those challenges with your help. Help us to be there for our children. Help us to train them. Help us to focus on them and to make sure that we are pointing them in a direction that they one day will be faithful elders, elders' wives, deacons, deacons' wives, preachers' wives, and faithful members of your church. We pray that we'll raise spiritual champions, that we won't settle for just having children that sit in the pew, that we will raise children who are eager to serve you and are willing to give up everything else in this life for your name's sake. And I ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.